Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the twister gene in ball pythons. I can almost guarantee most people haven't heard of the twister. It's a pretty amazing gene. It really scrambles up the pattern, and as far as what I can tell, it's actually a dark gene. It's actually been on the market for about 8 years, and let me tell you, it's kind of a hidden gem in ball pythons that is pretty much undiscovered still at this point. As a matter of fact, you can actually go over to morphmarket.com and do a search for twister. It actually has the gene in their database where you can actually do a search for it, and it'll bring up 0 ball pythons. There's never been a ball python over on Morphmarket. As a matter of fact, you can go over there and do a search for the super twister, and it'll be the same thing. You'll get no ball pythons that actually show up. And you can also go over to YouTube, do a search for the twister ball python gene, and I found 0 videos. No one's ever done a video on the twister gene. As a matter of fact, you can actually go over to morphmarket.com and switch it to the European version of Morphmarket and look at all the snakes over in Europe, and that's where you'll actually find a lot of twisters. There's actually just a little bit over 50 twisters and twister combinations over on the European version of Morphmarket, and you can actually look for the super twister. There's 2 super twisters listed, and from what I see, it's a pretty amazing gene that has an incredible amount of potential. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you the amazing potential of the twister ball python gene. Alright, so I want to jump over here at morphmarket.com, and I want to start with this snake right here. This is what a single gene twister looks like. Essentially what it looks like is it looks like a really dark normal as far as the color, and you can see on the sides of this it really has like a really scrambled up pattern, and that pattern really transfers to a lot of combinations. It can really jumble up a lot of the patterns in a lot of your other genes, and a lot of the twisters will actually have kind of a line usually down the bottom third of the snake, which is kind of interesting. And if you're wondering how I actually found this over here, it's kind of interesting. I was actually looking at different versions of Morphmarket, and to kind of switch back and forth, you can come up here and there's a little drop down menu, and you can actually go, usually when most people come over here in the United States or Canada, I'd say probably you're on the United States version, and you have to actually come up here and manually switch to the European version or the South African version. I actually looked over here on the South African version of Morphmarket, and there wasn't any twisters. It's only in Europe, and it seems like it was actually first discovered in Germany. So maybe there's some information out there that's in a different language, maybe in German. Maybe I'm just not using the right keywords in my search to find a lot of information, but it's kind of amazing as far as it's pretty much like a hidden gene over here only on the European Morphmarket, which is kind of crazy. And look at the price, just $350, which is kind of crazy for a really amazing gene like this. So I wanted to show you the potential. I actually found quite a few combinations with single genes mixed in with a twister that makes some really amazing combinations. It's kind of surprising some of the combinations you get with the twister. So here's the first one I want to show you, and that is the Mojave. You're probably familiar with the Mojave. It's actually in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. It kind of looks like a lesser, maybe like a dark version of a lesser. They're both in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, but the Mojave, a lot of times when you actually work it into some of the other genes to make some blue-eyed leucistics, you can actually make some purple colored snakes like the purple passions or the mystic potions, which is pretty awesome. If you actually breed 2 Mojaves together, you get an all-white snake with bright blue eyes, the super Mojave, which is pretty awesome. And here's what happens if you take the Mojave and you work in the twister. Take a look at this. This is kind of crazy. I've never seen anything with one single gene that would do this to the Mojave. This is actually the Mojave twister, also known as the Chaos, which is a kind of a crazy name for this. Just 2 genes, which is pretty amazing. It almost kind of looks, at first glance, it almost looks like a granite type of, like a pixelation on the side, but I haven't seen any granites that would actually do anything like this. And usually your super granites, you know, there's not, a lot of times the granite is kind of tricky, because sometimes, you know, the granite will give you some pixelation in the side, but a lot of times it's not genetic. And I haven't really seen a granite that would do anything like this. And if you actually look at the color of the snake, how dark it is, you can definitely tell the twister is darkening the Mojave even more, which is pretty crazy. And then kind of on the back side of the snake, in the back third here, you can kind of see that characteristic line down the back of the snake, and then you have kind of a dotted line up the rest of the snake, which is kind of a crazy combination. So here is the lesser. The lesser is really similar to the Mojave, except the lesser is a little bit lighter, and I would say the lesser is the king of blue-eyed leucistic. So if you actually take the lesser and you breed it to any other gene in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, you'll get an all-white snake with blue eyes. So you can actually breed it. There's quite a few genes in the blue-eyed leucistic. There's the lesser, the Mojave, the Russo, the Phantom, the Special, the Bamboo, the snake that I have around my neck at the beginning and end of every video. That is a Bamboo. If you actually cross that with the lesser, you get the all-white snake with the blue eyes. So here's what happens if you take the lesser and you work in the twister. Take a look at this. This is pretty amazing. I can't say I've ever seen any gene that would actually do this to a lesser. Look at the patterns on the side. They look like little daggers or like little mushrooms or something on the side. And you get this kind of almost like a flaming coming up between these really unique patterns that I've never really seen in any other gene that is anything even similar to this. Kind of crazy. So here's the banana. When you work the banana with the twister, you get a really crazy effect. And essentially what the banana is, a lot of people think it's the same thing as the coral glow. The coral glows and the bananas, I think they're exactly the same gene. They're both actually sex-linked genes. So if you actually have a male, it can be a male maker or a female maker, where if you actually took one of those, bred it to something else, all the banana offspring would either be all males or all females, which is kind of the frustrating part of the banana project. And here's what happens if you take the twister and you breed it with a banana. Take a look at this. This is pretty interesting. You actually get a banana that has a really crazy jumbled up pattern from the twister. Kind of twists up the pattern on the sides. If you actually look back at the banana, usually the banana has kind of a regular pattern, almost like a normal ball python. A lot of times you'll actually have these kind of alien heads with the two little eyes, kind of like the Roswell gray alien heads. And when you add the twister, it completely scrambles up the side of the snake. And another thing you'll notice on this too is this is definitely darker than most of your bananas. It looks like the twister actually darkens the background of even the banana, which means it's a pretty visually dominant gene as far as darkening some of the combinations. So here is the cinnamon. The cinnamon's a dark gene too. It's a pretty awesome gene. The cinnamon is really close to the black pastel. As a matter of fact, they're allelic. So you can actually take a cinnamon, breed it to a black pastel, and 25% of the time you'll get an 8-ball, which is a completely patternless, almost jet black snake, which is pretty awesome. A lot of people go for the, with the cinnamons, they actually go for different dark combinations. It's a really dark gene, makes a lot of awesome combinations. As a matter of fact, with most cinnamons, what it'll actually do is it'll kind of streak out the sides of the pattern in a lot of combinations. Instead of these kind of keyhole patterns or alien heads, you'll actually get kind of a jumbled up streaking on the side with a lot of your cinnamon combinations. And here's what happens if you work cinnamon into the twister. Take a look at this. This is kind of interesting. It really reacts almost completely different with the cinnamon. Look at the patterns on the side. This is almost like an extreme version of kind of almost like a granite, like really extreme version where you get a lot of pixelation in here. Kind of draws them out into these long, almost kind of similar to like the dagger type patterns on some of the other combinations, which is kind of interesting. And look at how dark the background is from the combination of the dark cinnamon, and I think it's even being darkened from the twister to give you an almost jet black background. And you can definitely see on this one, you actually have the characteristic stripe right on the bottom third of the tail, which is pretty interesting. So here's the last one I wanted to show you. This is actually the Super Twister, 2 copies of the Twister, and this also has cinnamon in the mix. So you can definitely tell this is completely different than anything I've ever seen in ball pythons. It's definitely a completely different gene. It's not really, a lot of times when you find a new gene, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, the acid could be close to the confusion or the static or something like this. And as far as, looking at this, it looks like to be a completely different gene with a lot of potential. And if you actually look at how dark this is, it's pretty amazing. And the fact that it's actually completely wiped out the sides from the Super Twister Cinnamon, which is kind of an interesting effect. You can definitely tell it completely changes. So if you actually just have one copy of the Twister, that's what you get over here, and then 2 copies of the Twister with the Cinnamon, you get this completely wiped out side. You can definitely tell the line coming right down the back. This time it almost extends over the whole snake. This definitely has a lot of potential as far as kind of one of the best unknown genes. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And David McNear asks, have you had any kinking problems with your caramel albino hatchlings? And that is a very good question. So when it comes to kinking in ball pythons, essentially what we're talking about is deformities of the spine. So if you take your ball python and stretch them completely straight out and you have a kink in there, what that is it's a spinal defect where the spine won't completely straighten out. And sometimes you'll have just a little bit of a kink, and I've actually seen some that are really severe, multiple kinks all through the spine to where the snake can't even straighten out. In some cases, I've actually seen where people have to euthanize their snake because there's so many kinks in the spine, which is pretty unfortunate. And as far as certain genes in kinking, I've actually seen kinking pretty much in all the genes all across the board. I've actually seen them in ultramels, in albinos, in lessers, and Mojaves. And there's a few genes that actually get a bad rap for kinking, maybe have a higher frequency of kinking, and that is the super black pastel, the super cinnamon, and the caramel albino. And it's kind of interesting with the caramel albino. I kind of researched a couple of years ago on the caramel albino, and I found that it almost seems like it's line dependent. I've actually seen some people where they've been breeding caramel albinos for over 20 years with zero kinking, none at all. And I've actually seen some people that actually, got, I don't know if it's a bad line of caramel albino, what's going on, but a lot of people, get into caramel albino and they have a lot of kinking in a lot of their offspring. Some people think it's genetic based on certain lines or certain genes. Other people think it may have something to do with the incubation temperature and humidity as far as improper incubation of your eggs. I think the jury's still out. And it's kind of interesting. A lot of people kind of stay away from the caramel albino is just from the kinking problems, but I've actually seen it's a pretty amazing gene. I actually have a couple het caramel albinos in my collection, and I have yet to actually take one of my possible hets and breed it back and get a visual. If you actually have, problem with a recessive, like any kind of genetic defect of a recessive, if you just have one copy of the gene, there's no problem at all. So all my het caramel albinos never had any problems at all. It's only when you have 2 genes that you could possibly get some kinking. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.